All right. I'm going to let everyone in now.
Okay.
All right. Welcome, everybody. I'm going to ask everybody to please stay muted for the duration of the presentation. So, hello, my name is Ron Payne. I'm president of the Otter Creek Audubon Society, and I'd like to welcome you all to our second cabin fever lecture series of the year. As you know, we usually have 3 cabin fever lectures, and it looks like we are probably going to actually have that third one coming up next month. So if you'd like to learn about that, keep an eye on our events section on our webpage, or join our email events list. You can do that on our website as well, ottercreekaudubon.org. So like I say, we'd like everyone to stay muted throughout the presentation. And if you have questions, please leave your questions in the chat, and we will ask the questions. I will read the questions to Gary at the end of the presentation. So our speaker tonight is Gary Starr, a longtime Otter Creek Audubon Society board member. He is also the proprietor of Starr decoys, and usually he says he works all year so he can go travel, and that hasn't been possible in the past year or so, but he's going to be telling us about his last great trip, which was to New Zealand. So without further ado, here is Gary Starr.
Okay. Can everybody see the picture here? Ron, can you see it? Is it up? Okay. So let's see, how do I get rid of this stuff? Okay, so this is our birding trip to New Zealand, and we went a little bit over a year ago in January 5th to the 31st in 2020. It was when we found out about the pandemic, or about COVID-19, when we were on the trip, and came back. We're lucky to get back in the United States. So this is a tui, one of the native birds, and this is just sort of an example of what we were seeing. So on January 5th, we flew out of New York City through Los Angeles to New Zealand, and we landed on the North Island. And this is just to show you the size of New Zealand. This is the North Island, the South Island, and then we did an extension over to the Chatham Islands, which is down here to the lower right, which I have indicated by a little bird here. And that's actually part of Christchurch. Some basics about New Zealand. It was first settled about 800 years ago, 1250 to 1300 by the Maori. As of the end of last year, December 31st, there were over 5 million people in New Zealand. About almost 60% were European, and almost 15% were Maori. It was claimed by Great Britain in 1840 in some of their great land grabs. Actually, New Zealand was the last major landmass to be occupied by man. It became fully independent from the Commonwealth in 1947. It's about 1,000 miles southeast of Australia, so it's a little bit colder than Australia, across the Tasman Sea. It has approximately 104,000 square miles, and it's about the size of Colorado. from north to south, from the upper part of the North Island to the lower part of the South Island is 990 miles. This doesn't include a bunch of different islands surrounding the mainland. The capital is Wellington on the North Island. Auckland is the largest urban area. Auckland is where we flew into. Most of the people, I think it's 3/4, live on the North Island and not the South Island. So this is the day that we left our house. And you can see it's what they referred to on the trip as the donkey's belly. It was all sort of a gray sky and not much going on. And within the first day, we saw this woman with this beautiful flowered hat outside of Auckland. And I thought it was a nice comparison here. So we left on July 5th. We completely lost July 6th. And July 7th is when we landed early in the morning in Auckland, up here on the North Island. And we arrived and checked into our hotel by about 11:30. And Kathy and I had been up most of the night, but we decided to go for a long walk that day. So we went out, and in the yard right in front of the hotel, we saw the Australian magpie, a European goldfinch, sacred kingfisher, and a black duck mallard. It's a hybrid. And this is a spotted dove. Kathy, can you help me with this here? Excuse me. How do I remove this here?
It's fine.
Okay.
It's not showing on the other.
Okay. So when we walking, we had a local map that we got at the hotel, and we saw one of the closest places to walk to was the Water Care Coastal Walkway, which is basically the sewage plant for Auckland. And it was about 4 miles from the hotel. We walked down, and we luckily caught it where the tide was coming in and able to see probably from 20, 30 feet away, a white-faced heron, a variable oyster catcher. They're variable because they have several different phases of their plumage, and a pied stilt were some of the birds that we saw on our own. And then we got up and started walking around this big pond. And one of the first things we saw was this big bird, the Australasian swamp hen, which is a fairly big sized bird. It's about the size of a good sized goose. Over on the right here, we have paradise shell duck. It's a female, and it was sort of neat. It was out on the mud with a little baby falling around in its footsteps. We also saw a masked lapwing and paradise male shelduck. Then the next day, so we got back to the hotel and crashed for the night. Then we got up early the next day and took a taxi into downtown Auckland, which was probably about 20 miles from our hotel. Our hotel was right near the airport, and it was where we were going to meet our group the next day. This is the pinnacle that they have in downtown Auckland. And then we got on a bus that's that you hop on and hop off to go around to different parts. Let's see, different parts of the city. Out on the outer edge of the harbor is the Bastion Point. This is one of the first places you see if you're coming in to Auckland by sea. And we saw such great birds as the rock dove. And then we had a tui, which I showed you a picture earlier of. But I love this little white feather that it has right in the middle of its throat. We also saw the European goldfinch. One of the things that the early settlers did when they came to New Zealand is they brought a lot of the European birds because they wanted to hear everything that the they wanted to hear the sounds of the European birds and just make it feel more like home. So several of the birds in New Zealand that we saw are actually European birds. Well, as we were getting on and off the bus, from Bastion Point, we walked down to the aquarium. This is a bus that they had for the aquarium. I think you could probably figure out fairly quickly that it was for the aquarium. We stopped at the Holy Trinity Church, and this is a huge church, and they were doing a rerouting of the main route that goes by it. And so they had to move it. And over a 1 week period, they moved it from one side of the road to the other to a new foundation. I guess it was quite a project. The Auckland Domain Military Museum is to the west of downtown Auckland, up in the hills. They also have a winter gardens, botanical gardens, which is really quite nice. Then we went up to Mount Eden, and we saw the European common blackbird. The Eden Park Stadium is where they have their rugby matches. And this little guy is one of the great little swallows that they have, the welcome swallow. We also saw this bird called a yellowhammer, and it was collecting seeds. What we're looking at in the top, in the middle with Mount Eden, is actually the cauldron from a volcano. It was much higher, and over the centuries, it has come down to this fairly shallow hill. Now, the North Island of New Zealand is part of the Australian plate, and the Pacific plate comes to the eastern edge of the North Island. And that's why there's a lot of volcanic activity in this area. I think you all probably remember about 1.5 years ago with the island blowing up with several people being killed from a tour company out in one of the Gulfs. That's right in this area. So then we went back down to downtown Auckland. We will be getting to some birds here later. This is the old train station that they had. And we took a ferry over to Davenport, which is across the harbor. Davenport is on a peninsula. And we climbed this hill looking for birds and really didn't see very much there. So we went back to the hotel, met up with Marcia and Jeremiah Parker for dinner. And the next morning, our group got together. And they, let's see. And this is our leader, Eric Forsyth, in the front with the blue bag. And this wasn't taken in Auckland, but we met at the after breakfast at the hotel and started out for a long day. So here we are in Auckland at the hotel, and these are different places that we went to. As you can see that we were pretty well concentrated right around Auckland and the northern part of Auckland. We'll go down and do the southern part of the island later. Okay. Okay, so on our left here, we have a silver gull. And in the middle, a double-banded plover. And let's see. And then this is a black swan. Could you tell Kathy that I cannot read anything on the top part of my screen? Okay. This is an immature black swan. And this is on Pakatutu Island, which is probably about 1.5 miles from where we'd walked the day before. I remember when a bar-tailed godwit showed up in Shoreham, and it was a big deal. Here's a whole flock of bar-tailed godwits. It was really quite something to see.
Okay, just tell me.
Wait a second. Oh, we have a little technical problem here.
I don't know how to get rid of that.
Gary, you're muted now. Gary, you're still muted.
Okay,
Okay. Then we went out to we went north to a Gannett. Oh, wait a second, I'm going to go back one more. It won't go back yet. Oh, there it is. Okay. We went north to a Gannett colony, and we were in our van, parked about a half mile away, came up and walked down a pathway down here to the right. And there's, you can see the lookout here on the right-hand side against the ocean. And we were able to be right on top of the gannets on the side of it, but there were thousands of gannets flying around. Then we went, the Salty Dog Hotel is where we spent 3 days. And we went to several of the other places near it. We went to, one of the first places we went to was Pakiri Beach. And the reason we went there was to see the ferry turn, which is in the lower left. And that was about as good a picture as you could get of it. It was probably a quarter mile away on the other side of this little estuary. We also had a nice look at a New Zealand plover. Okay, this is Matakana Loo. And the reason I'm showing the bathrooms or the loos in New Zealand is that Eric is kept talking about writing a book about the 50 best loos in New Zealand. And this is one of the top 50 here. Here's Kathy, and the ladies' room is on the right and the men's room is on the left. But Eric was pretty emphatic about that. And he had different things about how he was going to judge it. Then we went to Te Wharanui Regional Park. And this is the first place we went where they had a predator fence. And what it is they, historically, New Zealand had 3 mammals before man showed up on the island. And there were 3 different bats, one of which is now extinct. But so the conservation, Department of Conservation back in early 1970s started acquiring land and making predator-free places in it. This is this Te Wharanui is on a peninsula. Okay, we've got something else going here that's going to make this work, I think.
okay, just
Okay. So we walked in. This was actually bright sun, taking a picture into the sun to see what would happen. One of the interesting birds we saw in the wild was this South Island takahe. And this is the largest worldwide member of the rail family. And this is a beautiful beach, which we saw some of the shorebirds on. Again, we saw the Australasian swamphead with young. And this is again in the Tarafari Regional Park. The New Zealand plover was right in the corner of this beach when we were looking at it. And I thought this was sort of fun because they have the babies with them. The next was when right near the entrance of the park, there was a pair of variable oyster catchers on a nest. And as we're watching them, we're on a little estuary, and a buff-banded rail came and walked down probably 50 feet along the side of this little inlet. And it was really quite nice and put on quite a show for us. In the lower left, the New Zealand pigeon is a huge pigeon. It's about the size of a good-sized chicken. And so it really dwarfs our rock doves or other pigeons, but it's a beautiful bird. We have a few more pictures of it later. Another sharp little bird is this silver eye, which is, I believe, part of the warbler family, but actually it's part of the white eye family. And it's about the size of a warbler. And it's just a quiet little handsome bird. And this is all in that same Tawharanui Nui Regional Park. We saw a brown teal. We actually saw several of them. And we saw this one was a female that walked out in the path in front of us. And at the time that the bird book that we had was printed, there were only about 1,000 of these living. And they like fresh water. You don't find them on salt water. Another bird that they're protecting in this preserve is the North Island saddleback. And there is a South Island saddleback too. And they said the difference is the color of the brown on the front of the saddle. So, well, I have a picture of a South Island saddleback later, and I don't think you can tell the difference. On the lower left, where we're walking, we went back in 2 nights in a row. And on the second night, we finally saw the Northern Island brown kiwi. They tend to be nocturnal and scavenge at night. And and you basically find them by hearing them scruffling around through the leaves. And then you put a spotlight on them, but the spotlights have to have a red filter on them so you don't scare them. On the left is a moorpork. It's one of 3 owls that they have in New Zealand. They have the moorpork, they have the barn owl, and they have a little owl. We never saw the barn owl, but we saw the little and the moorpork. Then we went back, spent the night. The next day, we went to the Hauraki Gulf off Little Barrier Island. This is actually, when we went out of Sandspit Beach, we went by Tawharanui Nui to get to it. So this is the boat we went out on. Even before we went out, this white-faced heron was sitting beautifully on the dock. And our main target on this pelagic was the New Zealand storm petrel. It was rediscovered in 2003. They hadn't seen it for a number of years. And I think it's actually nesting on Little Barrier Island. Little Barrier Island is a conservation preserve area, and only scientists are allowed on it. So we did see this and did get some good shots of it. Looking at these here, the white-faced storm petrel, a black petrel, you can see from the angle of the shot that the black petrel is just right behind the boat. All the time the captain was cutting up chum and throwing it off the back of the boats, and the birds were just coming in. There was one particular place where there was an uplift of current, and that's where he placed the boat to throw the chum out. These are some of the other birds we saw in that same pelagic, the Buller's shearwater, and little penguins or little blue penguins, Cook's petrel, which are really, the petrels are just so much fun to watch because they almost dance on top of the water. And then there was the common diving petrel, which is a fairly small petrel. And I was really excited to see this bird because when we were in Antarctica, Kathy had seen the bird and I hadn't. So I had a dip in Antarctica, but we caught up with her in New Zealand on that one. As we're coming back into Sandpit Beach, We saw some more variable oyster catchers, another one with a baby. We were there in January, so that's the equivalent of our July. So, and as we're going back to the Salty Dog, we stopped at Shakespeare Regional Park, and our target there was the Spotless Crake, which is this tiny little crake, probably maybe half again as big as a robin, and it goes around in the vegetation. We were lucky enough to see it. This is another one of the loos that Eric wanted us to take pictures of for his book, and it's all electric. It's fantastic. You go in and the door locks when you leave. There's a timer on it, and all these loos are really extremely clean. They're a point of public pride, and each town seems to have one. The next trip was Tiri Tiri Mantangi Island Scientific Reserve. And this was a great place. This boat here, this catamaran, is a ferry that comes from Auckland. We picked it up a little bit further north on one of its stops and comes over to Tiri and drops you off. This is a conservation area, but they allow a good number of people to come onto the island and observe the different birds. It's really sort of an educational island for it. So here we are going over on the boat. They had several little feeding stations set up with water and food and with benches that you could sit down, and these birds would come to the feeding stations. One of the rarest birds there is the North Island kokako, which is here on the right with sort of the little blue thing below its bill. And that's actually fairly hard to find, but we went around and went on several of the smaller paths and finally found that. The island is about 220 acres long, in area. And until 1971, it was farmed. And so there was basically almost no trees on it. There is a big lighthouse on it. And the Conservation Department purchased it and made it predator free. And the name translates to looking to the wind. These are cute little birds, the stitch birds, the male and the female. And this is this bug here is actually about 6 or 7 inches long. It's called the Wetapunga, and that's a endangered species also. And that's one reason it was in the island. This south is another South Island takahe, and unlike the previous one that we saw, this one wasn't hidden. I don't have a picture of it here, but there was also a young baby with it. Another one that they're concerned about is the red-crowned parakeet, and we had good looks at that. Brown quail was there. And then the silver tree fern, which is one of the symbols of New Zealand. And what it has is it has spores on the bottom of it, underneath of it, that they say that if you carry it in front of you, will light up the path. So we've done the area around Auckland now, and now we're going to head down pretty much through the middle of the North Island, coming. What? Oh, okay. Coming down to Kapiti Island, and then we're going to go down near Wellington and go to the South Island. This was a travel day, and we were in Tiru. And on the left here, this big dog is made out of corrugated roofing material. And that is the loo for this town. And it was, again, it was probably the biggest loo that we had in the whole trip. This is another import, obviously, the European hare. And this was nice getting these two birds together, the silver or red-billed and the black-billed or buller's gulls. These big buildings are quite big also. You can see us standing in front of it here. On the on our next stop, we went to the Tangariro River, and the whole point was to find the blue duck. This only lives on fast-moving rivers. It's sort of like the torrent duck that you see in South America. And it was rainy and it was foggy, and we were lucky enough to spot this one duck. A lot of times the different groups don't see them. As we were going there, we saw a New Zealand scops, which are our scops or bluebills. They again have the nice blue bill. These only stay in fresh water. They don't go into the salt water. And I love this little guy down here in the lower right. I'm not quite sure what he's doing, but looks like he's having fun. This is a New Zealand grebe, which is one of the endemics. Then we spent the night near the lake, and then we above Lake Rotopunamu, and we went up to this little parking lot up in the mountains, and it's a place that you would just drive by 99 times out of 100. And we were there to see the yellow-crowned parakeets. And after about a half an hour, they finally flew in and landed where we could get a good look at them right out to the left. This was also our first tomtit, member of the tit family. And this is the North Island subspecies. We went to Tokananu Wharf outside Tarangi, and we were looking for the Australasian bittern. We were back on the upper right. You can see there's sort of a wetland at the end of the pier, and we were hoping to at least hear the bittern, but it wasn't our day for that. Here's a mature black swan in the upper left. And when we got out in the wharf looking out onto the lake, there were hundreds of black swans, as you can see in the picture here in the middle. This is a New Zealand grebe. If you notice that it has sort of white streaky feathers above its eye and below its eye with a bare patch here, we'll see a different grebe a little bit later in the trip. We also saw, this is a pretty cormorant, a little pied cormorant. Has very nice facial features. Then we had a stop actually that same day in a town called Bull, and you can see I don't know if you can read them here, but the places like the library is the readable. You know, and every place in the town ends in Bull, and it's this sign is quite a tourist attraction. Our next stop was Kapiti Island Nature Reserve, and Kapiti Island is just a magical place. It became predator-free in 1998 after several years of the Conservation Department working with it. They're working on getting a lot of the native plants and trees growing back, and it's a very restricted island. Let's see. When we were on the beach, you look out here, and it looks like it's a tractor out in the water. And if you look on the left, the second one down, the tractors went out into the water and the boats went right onto the trailers, and they pull them ashore, and you get on the boat by climbing up a ladder on the shore. The interesting things about Kapiti Island is there are three different sections. There's the north section to the right, and they only allow 60 people a day to go on for day trips, and you have to take everything in and carry it out. On the south end of the island, there are trails, and they let 100 people a day. They ferry over, and they have to leave at the end of the day. Where we stayed was near the north end, and there's a private holding, and it's been in the same Maori family for, I believe, over 100 years. And so they have an in-hold there, and that's where we were spending the night. The two pictures on the bottom are the shore. This is looking in the more sort of center left on the lower part is where we stayed. That's the in hole. And then this is the shore on the far right. Dueling, these are wekas. I thought they looked like they were setting off for a duel here. Another red-crowned parakeet. This is some of our accommodations. Kathy and I were in a cabin like this. The Parkers were in the luxury tent suite, which was pretty sweet. When we were having our first information, there was a Weka came and stood on the porch outside, and we were just amazed and stopped and looking at it. And turns out they're all over the place. We also saw one of the bigger parrots, the New Zealand kaka, and then the New Zealand bellbird. But they were quite tame. They haven't been hunted for years and years. This is also where I got the picture of the tui that's on the front. You can see all the beautiful plumage that he has. This is a little better picture here of the New Zealand pigeon. And this was probably standing 10 feet off the path as we were walking by. When we came off the island, Waikini Estuary and a scenic reserve was right there, and we were able to see a royal spoonbill doing its hunting and searching for food. Also a European greenfinch, but it was just this nice long grassy area. There are a few other birds. I don't remember right now what they were, but we weren't able to get pictures of them. The next we had lunch in Pemberton, and then we went down to Picton, right near Wellington, to get on the ferry on the lower right to go to Picton on the South Island. As we were waiting in line to get on the ferry, we look over and there's a nesting, a roosting place for white-fronted terns. So this is probably 10 feet from where our car was parked. Then we went down. So we've done the whole North Island, and we come to Picton, which is right here in the upper right-hand corner on Marlborough Sound. And what we're going to do here is we're going to go from Picton down here up to Arthur's Pass, up here to Mount Cook, Omarama. Then we're going to go to Milford Sound, and then we're going to eventually go down and catch a ferry to Stewart Island. So this is our first shot of the islands on the South Island. And this is Picton. This was a restaurant. They had a sign there that I particularly enjoyed. It says, "I can only please one person a day. Today is not your day, and tomorrow doesn't look too good either." But actually they were quite pleasant in there. And this is the Picton Loo. This is a little bit too modern, and Eric wasn't sure that it was going to make the top 50, maybe in the next grouping. We went out on a pelagic out into Marlborough Sound to Blumine Island, and we were looking for some specific birds. One was the New England King Shag, which is basically our cormorant. And while we were going, we saw this whole bunch of krill, and the captain scooped some up and showed it. I always wondered what they looked like. He actually let me drive the boat a little bit here too. These was part of the colony of the New England King Shag. These were spotted shags. This is a fluttering shearwater. I think this is the only picture I had of them here, but we've seen them on several of the pelagics, and they like to group together quite a bit. This is Australian or pied shag. And then we're at, how do you say that, Kathy?
I can't remember.
Okay. Blue Mine Island. And what we're looking for specifically on this island is, let's see if I can get it here. It's called Mallard's parakeet or orange crown parakeet. And I believe this is the only place in the world where it exists. And we found this one that was very cooperative. And actually, there were two of them. Just see on the top right picture, there's one far to the right. And that, and so that was a nice find. This is the South Island tomtit, another New Zealand fantail, a New Zealand bellbird. Then we got back in our van and went to Lake Elderwater, a waterlife refuge, and saw the Australasian shoveler. And remember how I pointed out the feathers in the New Zealand grebe? This is a hoary-headed grebe, and the lines on the face go all the way from the top to the chin, and a Eurasian coot. And this was just a little pull out off the main highway. You'd hardly notice it was there, but our guide seemed to know all the good places. Then we came to Kakora. And this view here is of the bay, and this was taken right outside of our window of of the inn that we were staying at. And down on the right, the Indian places where we had dinner. But I like the place in the lower left for the imaginative marketing of their food. Just having two big food signs. Let's see, Kaikoura is known for the Kaikoura Peninsula or Kaikoura Canyon. And the canyon is a big, deep water canyon that goes out into the Pacific Ocean on the east side of the South Island. And as the current comes, it pushes a feed up to the surface. And at that point, that's all sorts of birds and fish and sea mammals just love to be there. So we went out, and again, we got on the boat on shore by a ladder. And the upper left is the boat that we got on. And we had these albatross and petrels just flying around the boat. On the upper left is the Gibson's wandering albatross, a petrel, and a Cape petrel. This little Cape petrel here in the upper right. When they fly, they say they look like a piano keyboard. But you can see from this shot here that it was trouble getting the whole bird in the picture because they were so close. And on the right sort of shows you some of them just feeding on a big bunch of the food that was thrown out to them. On the next is a southern royal albatross. We had a family of dusky dolphins come in, and they did some jumping for us too. It was really an extra special treat. The kelp gull looks like our great blackback gull, but a lot sharper, I think. We had also seen those in Ushuaia. And this is the boat here with Eric on the right. Then we had a travel day, and we stopped at one little place that had a Cape Barren goose. I know just reading the ABA magazine, a Cape Barren goose was seen off of Alaska. So that sort of tied that in. Here's some of the view of the South Islands of being in the middle. And unlike the North Island, which is on the Australian plate, the South Island is almost all the Pacific plate. And so the Pacific plate is this flatter land on the eastern 2/3 of the South Island, and it butts against the Australian plate, forming these fantastic mountains that you see in the background here. That's why this is such and being the latitude is in the roaring 40s, that's why this is a great skiing area during our summer. Here's one of the loos. This is actually one of my favorites. Somebody did a lot of work on this one. That's Jeremiah. That's not part of the loo. And just sort of fun. Eric had this in the top 10, so that was a big one. We're on our way up to Arthur's Pass, which is up higher in the mountains. It wasn't very busy when we were there. It's primarily a skiing town. We stopped to look out over where all the runoff goes going down into the valley. And it's just this whole sweeping valleys. On the right, top right is MOA structures. And these were just huge birds. I think they were head high, about 9 feet tall. But then I read something else that said that they figured out they never raised their heads over their backs. So their heads were straight out. So this doesn't look quite right. Then we ran into the Kia. And the Kia is a parrot that's actually very well known for attacking cars. Quite often, I don't know if you've seen specials on it, but they'll be up at a ski area. The Kias will come and pull the rubber out from around the windshields. And they're quite a pest and a real bane to the insurance industry in New Zealand. Then we went to Arthur's Pass. And actually, most of the birds we saw, we stayed in this multi-cabin little resort area and saw the South Island robins. They were quite tame, got quite close to them. And a little rifleman. This is one of our real targets for this area. He has basically almost no tail and he has a little caterpillar in his mouth. The picture that's hard to see in the center is Kathy and Jeremiah looking at the town library. And the library is kept in an old refrigerator. And I don't know whether the X books are kept up in the freezer or not, but the bottom was filled with popular novels. Then we went south again to St. John's Observatory, on Mount John Observatory on Lake Kukaki on the way to Ararama. This is one of the birds we get a good shot of was the common chatfinch, which is another European bird, and then the Eurasian skylark. People definitely wanted to bring the skylark to New Zealand because of its beautiful call. And then we went to Omarama, which was sort of unspectacular, but it had a place that we spent the night in, or 2 nights in, which is right down here below. So other lesser goldfinch. The upper right corner is actually sheep at sunrise in a pasture. And the upper left is a tourist trap. Then we, on that first day, we went to the Clay Cliffs. We were looking for the New Zealand falcon. As we were going in, we saw a beautiful swamp harrier sitting on a post, got out to take some looks at it. And we were actually able to see the New Zealand falcon, but it was quite far off, probably 300 meters and quite high. And this is another greenfinch. I have several pictures of greenfinch, and I finally figured out that they like to sit exposed on tops of trees. So they're easy targets to take a picture of. Here we had the spotting scope out to see the falcon because it was so far away. And Eric's trying to line up to get a picture of it. As we were going out, we spotted this little owl, which was quite cute. I don't know if that's a proper birding word or not, but I'll use it. And then we went back the next day and we saw the New Zealand falcon land on the clay cliffs a lot closer. And Eric and I went up by a side path and were able to get on the same level as the falcon and take some pictures without disturbing it. So we were quite happy with that. That was actually one of our best views of the trip. Then the next morning, we went to Mount Cook, which is on the end of Lake Pukaki, and we saw black stilts. You can see one here flying over the water in the lower part below Mount Cook. And at the time that the bird book came out, they said that there were only 70 adult black stilts in existence. So that was a little ways away, and we went down near the lake, and sure enough, a couple of them came and walked almost to our feet here. These were probably 15 feet away from us. As we went a little bit further north into a sand pit, looking specifically for the New Zealand pipit, we were looking and looking and looking, and Jeremiah says, "What about this bird over here?" We look over, and there's the New Zealand pipit. So thank you, Jeremiah, for getting us on that bird. Then we went to a restaurant for some lunch and coffee. And they had a couple of nice signs, drink coffee, do stupid things faster and with more energy. No pulse yet, more coffee, please. This again in the lower left is Ben & Jerry's ice cream, which seems to be a popular one in New Zealand. So it's sort of fun seeing a little bit of Woody Jackson even over in New Zealand. Then we went to Kelland Pond, and we saw a great crested grebe, saw another double-banded dotterel or plover. They seem to use dotterel and plover interchangeably. And then we went to a lavender farm, and they actually had lavender ice cream, which was quite good. We saw the Pacific black duck and mallard hybrid. And when Kathy and I first saw it, we thought it was a Pacific black duck, but they said that almost everything in New Zealand is a mallard hybrid. Then we had a travel day. We went to the Kawarau Gorge bungee jump, and none of us were tempted to try it. Eric couldn't use the toilets in the lower left, although the female, male, and the handicap bungee jumping I thought was pretty inventive. Then we were we're going to Milford Sound, and we're looking for a certain wren up near the tunnel to go down to Milford Sound. And we got up and climbed up this hill here to get to a spot where we thought we could see them. The area was completely overcast. Kaka were flying around, but you could hardly see them because of the overcast. And then the overcast cleared, and we were looking up this beautiful valley. But we never found the wren. Then we went through the Homer Tunnel, which was probably a mile long. And when we got down the parking lot, there was a South Island tomtit, which showed very well. And if you thought the paradise shell ducks were timid, this is ones that were watching me eat my lunch. Actually, I shared my lunch with them. And this is part of the Australian plate where it's been pushed up by the Pacific plate. And this was, we went on a cruise through this fjord, and people said it was very similar to Scandinavia. So this was, the green boat was the one we went on, the Lucky Lucy.
Lucy Juicy.
Or the Lucy Juicy. We saw a New Zealand fur seals, and they actually put the bow of the boat under this waterfall. And this was a picture of a dike going out from where the boats were parked. We went on back through the tunnel, and we, as soon as we got through, we were looking for that wren again. We saw a J. Girogene or gray warbler. And we noticed that on the highway, there were no cars. There had been a car, probably 2 cars behind us, had caught fire and they closed the tunnel for 5 or 6 hours. So we were back almost by ourselves in the hotel. Then we went to Cascade Creek in Fiordland National Park. We saw another little rifleman and a South Island robin. This bird, the South Island robin, was persistent. It kept within 5 feet of us for probably 15 minutes. Then we're going down here, we're going further south, and we're going to go over to Stewart Island. We're coming from Milford Sound in the upper left. And this is the dock
Oh, I'm sorry.
in Bluff. And this is where we're going to go to Stewart Island. I think they used to export different ores out of this area. This was an immature spotted shag that we saw. And this is the ferry that they're putting a car on to South Island. No, to Stewart Island, to Oban and Stewart Island. The upper left is the dock that we landed on. The upper right with the red roof is the hotel. We stayed in cabins in the back of that. This on the left is the Oban Harbor. And then on the right was just a little bay that Kathy and I found doing some of our walks on our own. We did a Stewart Island pelagic to Bench Island, Wreck Island, and Alva Island. Saw the silver gull, red-crowned parakeet, weka. And one of the birds on Alva Island that we were really looking for was the yellowhead. And it came in, landed here for probably 3 seconds and then flew off. That was our whole view of the yellowhead. Upper left is some of the unusual fauna that they have on flora, I'm sorry, on Alva Island. And it's all pretty strange. Then we got down to the beach and we saw the South Island saddleback. So we got the North and the South Island saddleback. Then we walked around Alva Island, another South Island robin, went back and had dinner at the hotel, waited around a little bit until it got dark and met at this, outside this restaurant, the Kiwi French restaurant, and we got in a 4-wheel drive vehicle and went up to the Oban airport to see the southern brown kiwi. Again, we all had lamps with red filters on them. And we walked about 50 yards and sure enough, the southern brown kiwi shows up in the right. It didn't bother us. If we didn't bother it too much, it was around and finally something spooked it a little bit. It ran about 10 feet, tripped and fell over on its side. And we heard that it was not a really unusual thing for it to do. This is our second pelagic on Stewart Island. And we're looking for some of the penguins here. The Fiordland penguin. We saw that back in this little sea cave and it was way tucked in. So we got a very poor view of the Fiordland penguin. Southern Royal Albatross was flying around. These were yellow-eyed penguins. This was again a long distance shot with a group of 5 of them coming down just to get on the rocks and then they turned around and went back up. This is the Buller's albatross with a beautiful black line down the middle of the bill. Another Buller's albatross, Sullivan's, Faroe's shags. And this was one of the specialties of the area. They like to be on this one little island. The southern skua or brown skua. And this is some of the food that they were throwing out. This pelagic, they must have had a half ton of fish parts that they were throwing out. This on the right with the albatross swinging over the back of the boat shows you how close they were. A lot of birding in New Zealand is on pelagics or being on outer islands. 10 of the 22 albatross in the world actually breed on New Zealand land. And this is the back of the boat. as we're going back into the harbor. You can see here in a little on the right that it was a little bit rougher. And this is looking back over the harbor when Kathy and I took a walk one day. Then we went back from Stewart Island back to Bluff, and we're heading up to Dunedin, but we make a stop on the way. We stop at Otago Peninsula, and there's a big albatross rookery here on the side of the cliff. That's what all this white is, and you can't get anywhere close to it, which is great. Again, we were in a spot where we could look down and see the birds flying below us. The red-billed or silver gull. Again, the kelp gull with the baby. But what we were really looking for was the Otago shag, which is right here in the upper left. It's an all black bird. We had to wait quite a while before one finally flew by. And for some reason, up in that rookery, there was a royal spoonbill all by itself. We have no idea what it was doing here. On the lower right is a wandering albatross. Then we went into Dunedin. They had this sign here, alcohol may not solve your problems, but neither will water or milk. We thought that was pretty appropriate. And they had some great food, and we went to a French restaurant for dinner. And that was the end of the first part of the tour. The next day we flew north to Auckland, and then we flew southeast to Chatham. You can't really see it well, but up here in the upper right-hand corner, there's Australia, New Zealand, and then in that little box on the right is where the Chatham Islands are. And this was a 4-day extension that we did on the end of the trip. We flew in on this, on the little airline, the Chatham airline, and they go to a different city each day. So if it's Tuesday, you might be going to Auckland. If it's Wednesday, you might be going to Christchurch. Thursday might be going to Dunedin. There was a weka running on the highway we went in. It's pretty much of a farming community. This is an old farm, a lot of sheep particularly. And we went out on a charter, and it turns out Eric's normal pelagic charter had canceled, and we didn't know it, but he was working hard to get this other charter. It's the Owenga Harbor Charters. And this is where they store their boats. And this is our captain here on the right. And the boat that we'd seen previously was his cousin who gave us some lobsters. We saw fur seals on some of the islands. And you can't really see it here, but in sort of the middle left, there are two little green blobs, and those are the Chatham or Forbes parakeets. And they're a very endangered parakeet, and they just only find them, I believe, on this island. Chatham Island is interesting as far as conservation in that they have the black robin, and at one point there were only 5 living black robins with one breeding female, and now they're up over 200 of them. We did not see them. They don't take anybody near them, so they won't be disturbed. And this is what we were going on the pelagic for primarily. This is the Chatham albatross, or the Chatham Islands albatross, and that lives on Pyramid Island. And there are only about 4,000 of them in the world. So looking at these 4 islands, you can probably figure out which one is Pyramid Island in the upper left. We had these 2 Cape petrels, and I was talking about the piano keyboard. This is another Chatham albatross. And this is a whole flock of Chatham albatross on the lower right. And we went up fairly close to the island. Then after we left Pyramid Island, we came around another island, and we're looking for the shore plover, which for me has to be one of my favorite plovers now. It's just a gorgeous little bird. and there were only 250 of them in the world. And we were lucky to see a couple of them. You can see that they said this one is banded. Then we had a little blue penguin put a little show on for us. Down the left, we jigged for cod and caught some. Eric had forgot to bring her lunch. And so the captain, we jigged for cod. He cut them up, fried them up, and we had fresh cod sandwiches. It was really a real special treat. This is the boat we were on up in its rack on the beach. This guy on the right is looking for little fish, the ones that they have in sandwiches. We saw Chatham Island shags after we left the pelagic. These were a couple of butterflies. We didn't see that many butterflies in the whole trip. Then we went to Tuku Reserve, and this was just beautiful with all the open fields and the sheep, the dogs herding the sheep. And we saw the Chatham Island pigeons, which is bigger than the New Zealand pigeons. It's just a gorgeous, gorgeous bird. And then we went, the next day we went sort of around the whole part of the big Chatham Island. We saw black swans again. Again, there were bunches of them. Again, bar-tailed godwits. This is Eric and the back of the van that we had in Chatham Island. There was abalone shells and pieces on the shore, sheep in the roads, great food, beach flowers. And this was our target for that day, was the Chatham Island oyster catcher, which is only on the Chatham Islands. This is Kathy on the beach, the final day. And here we are at the Chatham Islands International Airport, getting ready to fly back to Auckland. No, actually to Christchurch. So we flew to Christchurch. This is the bed and breakfast we stayed in. This is another one of the butterflies I saw. It was the International Buskers Convention. So there were shows going on all over the city for the days we were there. We were there for 2 nights. And then in the river in the botanical gardens, there was a bunch of different birds, paradise shellduck here, common greenfinch, New Zealand scaup, song thrush. This is the Christchurch Cathedral, which got partially destroyed in an earthquake, and it hadn't been rebuilt for a number of years because the politicians were waiting until the government decided that they would rebuild it the way it was and not put a modern cathedral in. So that was the end of our trip. We gained a day going home. We had a trip total for the whole group of only 138 birds, but there isn't a huge variety. For life birds, Kathy had 95, I had 94. This is us at Milford Sound. And then we were back home to Vermont and the pandemic. So that's it.
Okay, so stop it here. Don't do anything.
Okay,
Ron, you're on.
you're on.
All right, thanks everyone. If you guys have any questions, you can put them in the chat. I don't see any questions in there right now.
I see number 3 on the chat.
Hit the chat.
May
Oh,
not
that was the beginning. Oh.
Okay, yeah. So we answer all the questions?
Are you seeing questions, Gary?
No.
Neither am I. So I had a couple questions myself. I was wondering, what was the rarest bird you saw?
Probably the Takahe.
The one that looks like a swamp hen.
Yeah, I think that was probably the rarest. But there were several that that would not be around if they hadn't started serious conservation back in 1972.
Can you
Yeah.
read that?
Right, yeah.
What kind of gear do you use?
Oh, what kind of gear do I use? Is one of the questions I hear. I have a, hold it up here. This is what I have, just a small, probably a pound and a half camera. It's a Power Shot by Canon. And for me, I like it because I can hold my binoculars and hold the camera at the same time. And it has a fairly substantial zoom. You have to hold it pretty steady. But one of the things I found is that a lot of people with the bigger lenses, that any bird up close, they really can't get a picture of. And I end up getting a lot more pictures, but when the people with the bigger lenses and the bigger cameras, when they get a good picture, it's a gorgeous picture. It's really fantastic. But I think almost every one of those pictures was taken with this camera. And we had a few pictures that were taken with Kathy's iPhone. And that was where all the pictures came from.
All right, Gary, so Annette asks, did you draw the pictures that were on the back of the van?
Yes, I did. I customized it for Eric. Yeah. With Rock Jumpers, with Eric Forsyth's been with Rock Jumpers since they started, but he is just a character and he's just fun to be with. He is really on top of everything, works very hard, knows his birds, knows where they are. So I would highly recommend anyone trying to get in touch with him or through Rock Jumpers, or we can give you information also.
All right, any other questions? All right, so I guess we're gonna end it here then. Thanks everyone for tuning in. And again, we might be having another cabin fever next month. So if you want to know about that, the best way is to follow our website and check the events calendar there, or you can sign up to our events email list, and you can do that at the same spot on the website, and then you'll get a message about the upcoming event. So thanks everyone again for coming, and I guess we will end it here. Bye, everyone.
Great, thank you.
Larry,
Thank you. It's great.
thank you. Did a
You're
good
welcome. Thank you. Okay, I guess I'll shine.
I don't know what the story was with that